Heard every week on the amateur radio bands all around the world, broadcast on low-power AM and FM stations all across the United States, and one of the first podcasts on the Internet. We are This Week in Amateur Radio, the worldwide premier amateur radio and technology news magazine and bulletin service of the air. Here are the stories for release around the earth as we come to air with edition number 1393 of This Week in Amateur Radio. A new ARRL Technician Class live video course is announced for fast ham radio licensing. In Australia, the newly proposed amateur radio ban plan by the WIA is seeking input. AMSAT receives 2 amateur radio digital communications grants for new youth initiative programs. Neighbors object to an amateur 60-foot radio tower by citing incorrect notices and various safety concerns. Time is running out to vote in ARRL division elections. AMSAT ARIS 2025 highlights are presented by Frank Bauer, KA3HDO. Amateur Radio Digital Communications, ARDC, is now accepting grant applications. Changes to the ARL radiogram precedents are announced. We will tell you what they are. An amateur radio receiver detects unsecured communications coming from orbit, and a new proposed low Earth orbit satellite constellation will provide sunlight on demand. We will have all of this and a lot more coming up in this week's report. These headline stories will come to you in a moment along with this week's special features. We'll visit with Bruce Page, KK5DO, and get an update from AMSAT and what's new with all of those amateur satellites in orbit. Australia's own Arno Benshoff, VK6FLAB, and Foundations of Amateur Radio will tell us about the origins of the RF circulator. Our own amateur radio historian, Will Rogers, K5WLR, returns with another edition of A Century of Amateur Radio. This week, Will takes us aboard the Wayback Machine to the year 1923, where amateurs were making transoceanic contacts and experimenting with the shorter wavelengths. This is part 2 of a 2-part episode entitled The Fourth Time's the Charm. And we will stop by and visit with Bill Sawyer's AJ8B in the DX Corner with all the latest news on DXpeditions, DX, upcoming radio sport contests, and more. That's all straight ahead as North America's premier amateur radio and technology news magazine and bulletin service, This Week in Amateur Radio, takes to the air right now. Reporting from our headquarters studio just outside of Albany, New York, in gray, dismal weather, I'm George, W2XBS.
And reporting from our news bureau in Sandwich, Illinois, where we're currently experiencing some nice 60-degree weather just before we're going to get hit with 20 degrees tomorrow, I'm Jordan Kurtz, Kilo Echo 9, Bravo, Papa Oscar.
Reporting from our news bureau in Salem, Ohio, this is Denny Haight, NZ8D.
And from our studios in Naugatuck, Connecticut, where it's just a beautiful day today in the 60s, but the wind and the cold is on its way for next week, I'm Steve, K1FRC.
And this week, reporting from my ham shack in Cortlandville, New York, where I finally got the coax to my 80-meter dipole fixed after running it over with the lawnmower. It was in many, many pieces, I tell you. I'm Chris Perrine, KB2FAF.
And reporting from our news bureau in Rochester, New York, along the southern shore of Lake Ontario, I'm Dave Wilson, WA2HOY.
Coming to you from a rather nippy, but still sunny Space Coast in Florida, I'm Ed Johnston, W2PH.
And reporting from our Troy, New York news bureau, where it's cold enough to snow, I'm Eric, Kilo Delta 2, Romeo Juliet X-Ray.
And reporting from our news bureau in Middle Tennessee, where we eagerly await the arrival of little ghouls and goblins, this is Al Shepard, WK8W.
And reporting from our amateur radio outpost in the Catskill Mountains of upstate New York, where it might be time to think about getting some firewood in, I'm Don Hulick, K2ATJ.
And reporting from our news bureau in Fayetteville, Arkansas, where autumn colors are in full bloom, but just for a short time, I'm Will Rogers, K5WLR.
Leading off our news this week, do you have family, Friends or neighbors eager to get on the air? Introduce them to the new ARRL Technician Class Live video course. John Ross, KD8IDJ, is here with all the details.
The course includes everything needed to prepare for the FCC Technician Class Amateur Radio License exam. Enrollment is open now for the 2-day course, which takes place December 20th through the 21st, 2025. You can join ARRL Education Specialist Wayne Green, KB4DSF, for this interactive online class. We're going to have fun, said Green. I'll guide you through operating your first ham radio to how to communicate through amateur radio satellites. And we're going to get fully immersed in every question and answer with the info you need to pass the test. In addition to live instruction, course participants will receive the popular Technician Class Prep book from ARRL National Instructor Gordon West, WV6NOA, which has helped thousands of new hams get licensed with fast results. 1 year of ARRL membership is included, ensuring these new hams will have quick access to all ARRL benefits, services, and programs. You can visit the ARRL shop to complete the paid enrollment for a special introductory price of $99. Registrants will receive a follow-up email with instructions for registering for the live video course after completing your order. And if you have any questions regarding the course, please contact the ARRL Education and Learning Department at 806-594-0285 or email ead@arrl.org. I'm John Ross, KD8IDJ.
Once again, the course will include 2 days of live instruction with expert ARRL Educational Specialist Wayne Green, KB4DSF, Technician Class Prep book by Gordon West, WB-NOA, and 1 year of ARRL membership. Those who remember ARRL's recorded video courses of the past will recall how valuable it is to see and hear lively video instruction. This new course will ensure students have an even more personal, interactive experience. Green will present the material in bite-sized sections, demonstrating just how much fun amateur radio is.
Regulatory changes and shifts in on-air activity are two of the major drivers behind a wide-ranging overhaul being considered for Australia's ham bans. The Wireless Institute of Australia's Technical Advisory Committee opened a community consultation on October 17th and is expecting hams who have made requests over the years to formally weigh in on these proposals until the deadline on December 12, 2025. The proposed changes accommodate growth in the use of new modes and new areas of interest, particularly those involving the use of digital technology. They include revising ATV segments based on widespread adoption of digital ATV modes, a review of repeater subbands considering the growth of digital voice hotspots on 2 meters and 70 centimeters, and band plan data for the microwave bands between 24 and 134 gigahertz are also being reviewed. On HF, the proposal will try to achieve better alignment of band plans, including 630 meters and 160 meters. A comprehensive list can be found on the WIA website. The WIA is seeking responses only from licensed hams and clubs based in Australia. Revisions are expected to be published by the end of the first quarter of next year.
You're listening to North America's premier amateur radio and technology news magazine of the air. We are This Week in Amateur Radio, distributed worldwide at twiar.net.
Frank Karnauskas, N1UW, AMSAT Director and Vice President of Development, is pleased to announce that 2 grant applications were approved this week by Amateur Radio Digital Communication. The first grant is for additional software licenses for production of BuzzSat.com series of online courses designed for high school students. The first course, Introduction to Satellite Meteorology, was introduced at Hambench in 2025. The production cycle begins with content development by a volunteer subject matter expert. In the case of the Satellite Meteorology course, retired high school Earth Science teacher Eric Sonnewald N2XSE created content by harvesting open source material, both text and illustrations, and organizing it into a frame-by-frame presentation. From there, the frames are located into a specialized educational authoring program that adds a complex assortment of interactivity tools that help make the learning experience engaging and effective. Constant interaction required of the student helps to prevent the lessons from becoming a mind-numbing text, next page, turning sedative. The authoring software has several AI-assisted capabilities, including the ability to generate audio narrative for text and to translate courseware into up to 70 different languages. The theme of the lesson is Satellites in Space Help Us Live a Better Life on Earth. 14 courses are planned for completion by the end of 2026. The courses are free to students, teachers, at-home educators, scouting leaders, and lifelong learners of all ages. You can experience the Introduction to Satellite Meteorology course now at www.buzzsat.com. The second grant is for production of a satellite-themed coloring book for younger, elementary-age kids. The coloring pages in the book show how satellites play important roles in almost every aspect of modern life. Satellites and their role in agriculture, navigation, broadcasting, pollution control, and wildfire fighting are just a few of the 12 topics shown in the book. Production of the coloring book began about a month before the application for the grant was made, so the finished book cover as well as the sketches for a few inside coloring pages were shown at the AMSAT Space Symposium held back in October. The coloring books will be available before the end of this year for download free of charge from the AMSAT-sponsored www.CubeSat.com website.
Roger Adam, an adjacent property owner in Genoa, Nevada, used the general public comment period to object to a 60-foot ham radio transmitting tower approved by County Community Development near 265 Old Barn Road. Adam said the Genoa Historic District Commission had rejected a 60-foot 5G tower 2 years earlier and said Community Development approved a 60-foot ham radio tower adjacent to his property's border. He said he submitted opposition by email and telephone on the same day he received the development notice, and that the project applicant's southern neighbor refused to sign documents approving the project. Adam raised safety concerns about the telescoping tower's structural integrity, saying its proximity to adjacent properties could cause a collapse, property damage, or fire. He said multiple Pioneer Trail subdivision owners oppose the tower and contended that at least 6 Genoa Lake residents were not notified by the county. Adam also criticized the project notice, saying it described a retractable amateur radio antenna without drawings or photos, and that written comments were limited to 10 days and sent by mail only to adjacent property owners. Adam asked why the project was treated as a minor design review rather than a larger review process, and urged elected commissioners to ensure taxpayers have the options to vote on decisions that they consider significant. The board did not take action on the matter during the meeting. The comment was heard during general public comment. No county staff presented a reply on the record during the public comment period. The matter remains at the community development review stage, as described by the commenter.
ARRL has called on General Mobile Radio Service, or GMRS operators, to join its grassroots campaign to pass the Amateur Radio Emergency Preparedness Act. In an open letter to the GMRS community, ARRL says, even though you may not be an FCC-licensed amateur radio operator, as an FCC-licensed GMRS operator, you can help by sending a letter to each of your congressional representatives and your senators. GMRS users should go to www.arrl.org/HOA and select the GMRS Users button to create their letters. The letters will be automatically generated when they enter their FCC-issued GMRS call sign.
Here's a chance to see your club in QST. ARRL has made 2026 the year of the club, a year-long celebration of ham radio clubs and everything they do for amateur radio. And just one way of honoring various clubs, QST will feature club photos in every 2026 issue. If the club wants to take a shot at being highlighted in the pages of QST, here's what you do. Get your club members together looking their best. If you have a club t-shirt or ARRL shirt, this is a perfect occasion for wearing them. Consider posing with your club's sign and banner. Take high-resolution images. If you're taking photos with a phone camera, please make sure it's set for highest quality. Also take photos in the horizontal and vertical orientations, and please do not crop or otherwise edit those photos. Type up the names and call signs of any hams that are pictured, the name and call sign, if applicable, of the person who took the photos, and the full name and call sign of the club. And then send the information along with one of the vertical and one of the horizontal photos to qst@arrl.org. And remember to read QST each month in 2026 to see if your club has been featured.
ARRL members in the Pacific, Southeastern, and Southwestern divisions have until noon Eastern Time on November 21st, 2025 to cast their votes for ARRL board seats. You may vote in the election if you were a full member in the division as of September 10th, 2025. Check your email and postal mail for voting instructions from Election Services Corporation and make sure your voice is heard. If you haven't received your ballot information, contact the ESC Help Desk at 866-720-4357 or email at arrlelection@electionservicescorp.com.
The ARRL Foundation Scholarship Program has opened the application window for its 2026 scholarship. The applications will be accepted through December 30, 2025 at 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Students are encouraged to apply for more than 170 scholarships, ranging from $500 to $25,000. All applicants must be active FCC-licensed amateur radio operators. The scholarships were established by generous donors and managed by the ARRL Foundation as a means to inspire youth to explore amateur radio and to pursue higher education and related career paths, especially in wireless communication. In 2025, the ARRL Foundation awarded 170 awards, totaling $800,000. For more information and the online application, go to www.arrl.org. Scholarship Program.
The Murgus Amateur Radio Club is celebrating its 50th anniversary this year with a special event that includes the University of Scranton, King's College, and amateur radio station W3USR. The station is part of the University of Scranton Physics and Engineering Department, a university student club, and a flagship station for the Ham Radio Science Citizen Investigation, or HAMSCI project. The event, organized in partnership with the Slovak Heritage Society of Northeast Pennsylvania and the Luzerne County Historical Society, celebrates the November 1905 public unveiling of the Father Murgus Tone Method, a wireless communication system capable of transmitting voice and sound over long distances, and the forerunner of the Continuous Tone Coded Squelch System, CTCSS, and Digital Coded Squelch, or DCS. It was developed and patented by Father Joseph Murgus. The test included a series of messages exchanged between Father Murgus, then Wilkes-Barre's Mayor Frederick C. Kirkendall, then Scranton Mayor Alex T. Connell, and Reverend Michael John Hoban, a former bishop of the Diocese of Scranton. All of the activity begins at 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, Saturday, November 15th. Wilkes-Barre Mayor George C. Brown and Scranton Mayor Paige Cognetti will recreate that transmission with King's College President Reverend Thomas P. Looney and the University of Scranton President Reverend Joseph G. Marina. After the tone method demonstration, W3USR will be on the air for ARRL November Sweepstakes SSB. All of the events are open to the public. The Murgus Amateur Radio Club is an ARRL-affiliated club.
You are listening to North America's premier news and information service for the amateur radio hobbyist. We are This Week in Amateur Radio.
The BBC now expects to close its flagship radio service, Radio 4 on longwave, at some point during 2026. This according to a BBC contact that has told the campaign to keep longwave. The news comes in the month that marks 91 years of broadcasting on longwave from the main Deutwich transmitter and during the 100th year of one of the most iconic longwave programs, the Shipping Forecast. Meanwhile, the campaign to stop this shutdown altogether continues. Any longwave shutdown during 2026 would leave the shipping forecast inaudible to many mariners, as FM and Coast Guard signals cannot travel further than a few miles offshore. It would also deprive thousands of longwave listeners across the country from a much-loved source of news, entertainment, and education in the form of Radio 4, which isn't available in all areas on FM or DAB. Contrary to rumors circulated on some parts of the internet, however, an exact shutdown date for longwave has not yet been decided, as the BBC continues to carry out an impact assessment on the closure of the service. The BBC has stated its intention to inform listeners of the actual date at least 2 months before the signal is shut off, and this could happen as early as January 2026 or not until December. The campaign to keep longwave continues to push for this date to be pushed back further and, indeed, indefinitely postponed. In a report called Still Speaking to the Nations, published earlier this year, it set out several important reasons for keeping the longwave broadcast. Those reasons include the low energy cost of broadcasting from a single transmitter to the whole nation, the importance of a single nationwide reliable signal in the event of war or cyber attack that could render the internet inaccessible, the need for longwave broadcast of shipping forecasts at sea, provision of Radio 4 in parts of the country that are poorly served by FM, DAB, and the internet, the heritage value of continuing a service that's run for nearly a century, let alone the countless vintage radios capable of tuning in, and no hard evidence that longwave listenership is declining and the need to attract new listeners to radio for the BBC's own survival. Added to this is the importance of Radio 4 longwave to listeners in war-torn Ukraine who can rely on a trustworthy source of news that cannot be blocked by hostile powers. The BBC has yet to provide a detailed response to the report or to a petition to keep longwave that contained over 5,000 signatures, which was delivered in person to the Broadcasting House back on June 7th, 2025. In a time of uncertainty, division, and political turmoil, the importance of Radio 4 longwave has never been greater. I'm Mike Nikolic, N9OVQ.
It is the first half of the month, and that means it is time for the monthly report from the Volunteer Monitor Program. The Volunteer Monitor Program is a joint initiative between the ARRL and the FCC to enhance compliance in the amateur radio service. This is the current activity report of the Volunteer Monitor Program. Technician operators in Indiana, Colorado, and Arizona were issued advisories concerning 20-meter FT8 operation, a band on which technicians have no privileges. Technician operators in Kansas and California received advisories concerning 40-meter FT8 operation. Technicians only have CW privileges on that band. A commendation was issued to an operator in Maine for exceptional courtesy during a net on a 2-meter repeater, in which he explained to new licensees the misconceptions regarding antenna tuners and resonant and non-resonant antennas. An operator in Georgia was issued an advisory concerning transmitting music on 75 meters, which is prohibited by Section 97.113, Subpart A, Paragraph 4 of the FCC rules. There was one virtual club presentation about the Volunteer Monitor Program given to the Mount Diablo Radio Club in California. Technician operators in Florida and Georgia received advisories concerning 17-meter FT8 operation, a band on which technicians have no privileges. Technician operators in Florida, California, and Oregon received advisory notices concerning 20-meter FT8 operation, again a band on which technicians have no privileges. A commendation was issued to an operator in Ohio for exceptional work with the April 29, 2025 Skywarn net on the Preble County 145.470 MHz repeater. There was one FCC meeting and one FCC case referral. The totals for this report's monitoring were 1,067 hours on HF frequencies and 1,883 hours on VHF frequencies and above, for a total of 2,950 hours. We thank Volunteer Monitor Program Administrator Riley Hollingsworth, K4ZDH, for this month's report.
Participants in the National Traffic System message nets will soon be noticing two changes in ARRL radiograms. John Ross, KD8IDJ, files this special report on the NTS changes from League headquarters in Newington.
For the first time in 45 years, a new message precedent or priority level is being introduced, and the list of numbered ARL radiogram text has been updated and expanded. The new C for certified precedents joins the long-standing list of E for emergency, P for priority, W for welfare, and R for routine message categories. It is to be used for unique messages to specific individuals with known contact information and must be delivered within 48 hours of origination. The C precedent may not be used for bulk messages such as those sent to welcome new members to the hobby. It is the first new precedent established since the W welfare category was introduced in 1980. There are many newer ARL number radiogram text. Anyone involved in traffic nets is encouraged to download the complete list from either the NTS 2.0 website or the Radio Relay International RRI website. The changes are part of an ongoing effort to modernize the national traffic system and result from a memorandum of understanding establishing a closer working relationship between NTS and RRI. More details are available in the November issue of the NTS letter. I'm John Ross, KD8IDJ.
In addition, the list of standardized ARL numbered radiograms has been updated and expanded to keep up with changing technologies and messaging needs during disasters and emergencies. The use of ARL in a message alerts the receiving operator to expect ARRL numbered radiogram in the message text. For example, the new ARL 35 is a shortened form of telling the recipient that the sender is evacuating to a family member or friend's house. And the ARL 92 is shorthand for widespread disruptions to internet service at this location. There are many more new ARL numbered radiogram texts. Anyone involved in traffic nets is encouraged to download the complete list from either the NTS 2.0 website or Radio Relay International.
And the countdown is on. ARRL full members have till December 31st, 2025 to earn up to 6 automatic entries for a chance to win the ICOM Dream Station. This is a complete ham radio station featuring a limited edition IC 7760 HF and 50 MHz transceiver, an IC PW2 amplifier, desktop microphone, and a special ICOM 60th anniversary Seiko watch, all generously donated by Icon America. Members automatically earn ARRL sweepstake entries when you join or renew your ARRL membership. That you earn 1 entry. If you set up auto renewal, you earn 2 entries. And if you donate to the ARRL Diamond Club, you earn 1 entry for every $50 donated. Note that there's a limit of 6 entries per person. ARRL Director of Development Kevin Beal, K8EAL, shared that many members, including longtime life members, have joined the ARRL Diamond Club this year, earning entries while supporting amateur radio beyond membership dues. Diamond Club donors are fueling the future of amateur radio while unlocking a shot at winning a state-of-the-art ICOM Dream Station valued at over $17,000, said Beal. These donations provide vital funds that will ensure ARRL will continue to work to promote amateur radio, including advocacy, education, technical resources, and public service. These funds also fuel our work to develop the next generation of active hams, including free student membership for youth and programs that recruit new hams of all ages. Every gift is an investment in the hobby we love. The Diamond Club is an opportunity to amplify amateur radio's voice through the ARRL And this year to potentially upgrade your shack with a winning sweepstakes entry, said Beal. Learn more about the 2025 ARRL sweepstakes and view the official rules on the league's website. On a personal note, I've been to the league headquarters like last week. The prize is on display. You don't want to miss this. Steve Sawyer, K1 FRC.
You are listening to This Week in Amateur Radio, available to download as a podcast from anywhere on the web podcasts are available.
Hello and welcome to the DX Corner for your weekly dose of DX. I'm Bill, AJ8B. I'd mentioned previously that our DX Club, the Southwest Ohio DX Association, had just published a special edition of the October newsletter dedicated to 160 meters. Scott, N4JN, Dave, K3BQ, and Ken, NS7 Victor, each dropped me a note and are now reading the newsletter. You can get a copy as well by emailing me at thedxmentor@gmail.com. The word for the week is antenna counterpoise. An antenna counterpoise is a system of conductors, usually wires or a metal screen, placed near the ground but insulated from it, designed to act as an artificial ground plane for an antenna. In simpler terms, it's a substitute for physical earth ground when a good ground connection is impractical. For instance, you have rocky soil, a rooftop installation, or even you're operating from your room or apartment. The purpose of the antenna counterpoise is that it completes the RF circuit. Just like a light bulb needs two wires, an antenna needs a return path for RF current. The counterpoise provides that path when the earth cannot. The benefits are that it improves efficiency. Without a counterpoise, the antenna may radiate poorly and cause stray RF currents on the feed line. It also reduces common mode currents. This helps to prevent interference and it stabilizes impedance matching. Typical designs are radial wires where several wires radiate outward from the antenna base, often used for vertical antennas, or horizontal wires or screens, suspended above ground under the antenna. In summary, an antenna counterpoise is a deliberate conductor system that replaces or supplements earth ground, ensuring your antenna radiates efficiently and your feed line stays clean. Each week, I try to focus on those entities that will be available in the next 7 days. There's so much data to sift through that I thought a focus on next week might be helpful. Here's what you should find QRV when you tune the bands. The following DX information comes from Bernie, W3UR, editor of the Daily DX, the Weekly DX, and the How's DX column in QST. If you would like a free 2-week trial of the Daily DX, your only source of real-time DX information, just drop me a note at thedxmentor@gmail.com. So we have an update on the Fox Whiskey 5 Kilo Wallace and Futuna DXpedition. With over 36,000 QSOs in the log, FW5 Kilo went QRT on November 1st. Alex, K6VHF, says that by the 31st, most of the antennas will be packed away. Of course, that has passed. They are QRT now. They really did a great job. And stay tuned for the DX Mentor because we're going to have Alex, K6VHF, and a crew member or two with us to kind of discuss the DXpedition. Well, speaking of DXpeditions that are QRT, we also have 5 Kilo Zero Uniform Alpha. This year's contest was a wild one, they said. One of the radios was dead on arrival, the amplifier failed early, and the 40-meter vertical snapped in the wind. It felt like everything that could go wrong did go wrong. But they didn't quit. With backup gear, quick fixes, and a lot of teamwork, they pushed through the chaos. Despite the setbacks, they logged over 4,500 single sideband contacts, a result that they're proud of, and they should be. It was really a great DXpedition. Well, here's another one. 6 Oscar 3 Tango, the DXpedition to Somalia. Quote, mission accomplished. The team has wrapped up an unforgettable experience in one of the top 50 most wanted countries. The DXpedition has officially come to an end. With over 75,000 QSOs logged, our incredible radio adventure concludes in a country that hadn't been activated for a long time. Today, the team began the journey back home. After a well-deserved rest, QSO confirmations will start via LOTW for those who made their request through OQRS. Then paper QSLs will be mailed out, followed by bureau cards, again for OQRS requests. A huge thank you to Club Log for their constant support and valuable contribution to the amateur radio community. A detailed article about our adventure will follow soon. Thank you all for contacting us and for your trust, end quote. And that was from the group IV3JPP, IV3FSG, and IV3AZV. Well, these guys have really been active. This is 9 Uniform 1 radio uniform from Burundi. We now have been QRV for 4.5 days, running up to 10 high-power stations on 6 meters through 160. We are currently at 43,500 QSOs from this mountainside QTH, which is 2,340 meters above sea level. Quote, please know that we are still experiencing electrical power issues and outages even with additional generators. For this reason, we encourage you to check Club Log to see if you are in the log. We know some QSOs have not been completed as these power outages occur, so please work us again. Last night, we had a good FT8 run on 80 meters and 160 meters with good results to Europe, while not so favorable conditions to North America. We will continue to optimize our beverage receive system as well as the verticals we have on for transmit. We, quote, lost our 80-meter vertical the past 2 mornings from the high winds, which often occur at this elevation. We are in the process of remedying this situation by installing a more robust guy system that should withstand the wind. This morning, we relocated our 7-element 6-meter Yagi, which we believe should improve our path to Europe and North America. The previous location did not have a clear view in these directions due to obstructions from adjacent trees and hillsides. We have also constructed a dipole for 60 meters to be installed as a sloping dipole configuration from a very tall tree higher up the hillside behind our QTH. Look for us on 60 meters going forward. All operators are doing well and in great spirits with the focus on achieving team objectives. Please keep in mind that the plan for the 9 Uniform 1 RU de-expedition calls for us to be QRV until November 20th, so you still have 15 more days. We want to acknowledge and thank our sponsors, especially DX Engineering, Expert Electronics, REMO, the West Virginia DX Association, and the Arkansas DX Association. Likewise, we are most grateful to all of our individual donors for their support and generosity making 9U1RU possible. Thank you. 7-3 and all the best of DX from the 9U1RU de-expedition team, end quote. And they have been all over the bands and pretty darn workable. PY1 SAD Aldir is back in Guyana, which is 8 radio, and QRV once again from Georgetown is 8 Radio 1 Tango Mike until December 7th. During the week, listen for him on CW, sideband, and the digital modes on 160 through 6 meters between 2300 Zulu and 0200 Zulu. Over the weekends, watch him to be on more often. And you can QSL that via PY1 SAD, via LOTW, QRZ, or EQSL. We do have a group on from Bolivia. Members of the Jaguaret DX group have announced their plans to go back to Tarija, Bolivia as CP7DX until November 10th. In fact, they are QRV, and I've worked them. They plan to be active on 160, 80, 60, 40, 20, 15, 12, and 10 meters. QSL via LU1 FM, and again, that was CP7DX. Sierra Leone. Now, until November 10th, the Mediterraneo DX Club is QRV from Sierra Leone. They are using 9 Lima 8 Mike Delta until November 10th. Teams will rotate between the island, each staying 3 days and 2 nights, bringing all supplies and operating on bands from 40 through 6 meters, making the first 6-meter activation from there. Equipment includes a Flex 8600M radios and ICOM IC7000 for the 6-meter band, all running at 100 watts due to limited electricity. Although another report did say that 9 Lima 8 Mike Delta might run up to 600 watts on 6 meters with a 5-element Yagi, and that 9 Lima will run 100 watts on 6 meters into a 3-element Yagi. We'll have to see. Operators will log the contacts online, but real-time updates may not be available due to internet connectivity issues. So another African country, Tango Lima, the Central African Republic. Tango Juliet 1 Gulf Delta, Darek, began operating as TL8GD on November 1st. Over the weekend, he was reported on 20, 15, 10 meters FT8. Darek plans to be QRV in his spare time on HF, on FT8, FT4, sideband, and CW until the end of the month. And you can QSL that via LOTW and Club Log.
We'll be back with more with our DX mentor, Bill, HAP, right after this pause for stations along the network to identify. You're listening to This Week in Amateur Radio.
4 Kilo, Azerbaijan. Calls 4 Kilo 8 November and 4 Juliet 8 November will be in use for Victory Day. They'll be QRV to November 15th. The actual day is November 8th. This is for the 2020 Patriotic War, a 44-day campaign where Azerbaijan's army retook their historical boundaries from 30 years earlier. As seen in the news, Azerbaijan and Armenia made peace recently. QSLs for this operation, as they say, it is paper QSLs, direct only. Toga, 5 Victor. 5 Victor 7 Radio United is QRV until November 19th with RA1ZZ and R9LR operating. They say it is unrelated to the 2022 operation under that call sign. This will be a holiday style using HFCW, single sideband, FT8, and the QO100 satellite with a focus on 160 and 80. Direct OQRS requests and all donors will get a first LOTW confirmation. Paper QSLs will be via Club Log OQRS with donations of $10 or more. Log corrections and questions can be sent to ra1zz@mail.ru. Well, Africa is being very busy right now. We have an update from 7 Quebec, which is Malawi. Upon reviewing his 6-meter 7 Quebec 6 mic log, Don, who's also known as K6ZO, notes that, based on historical propagation data, conditions on the Magic Band are likely to be favorable for openings between Malawi and North America in the coming days. Last Monday, 7 Quebec 5 Bravo Mike was heard on 6-meter FT8 in the central and eastern U.S. between 1340 and 1800 Zulu. North American operators should monitor for this opening. Gary Hall, W1VE, will operate remotely as 7 Quebec 2 Tango on 6-meter CW at 50.090 MHz, self-spotting on the DX network, typically between 1500 and 1900 Zulu, although activity will depend on the reliability of AC power. So here's an update on the de-expedition to Sable Island, Charlie Yankee 0 Sierra. The Sable Island CY0S de-expedition team is very pleased to announce the addition of Ralph Fedor, K0IR, to the team. Ralph is in the DX Hall of Fame and holds 10 de-expedition of the Year awards. The CY0S team is very excited about Ralph joining and their effort, which is scheduled for March 19th to the 31st, 2026. Ralph has activated some of the most remote and inhospitable places on Earth. His bio is on the cy0s.com website, and Ralph is a great guy and a terrific operator, and I know he's a great teammate. Planning continues to go well. The biggest challenge is working with significant weight limitations for the 2 flights on the Britain-Norman Islander aircraft. The weight allowances for the 2 flights are 1,306 kilograms or 2,880 pounds, which includes the weight of the 9 team members as well as their food and personal gear. The team members' weight, food, and personal gear accounts for 73% of the total weight allowance for the aircraft. Because of the strict weight allowance, all team members will be bringing freeze-dried meals for their stay on the island. Currently, the team gear is above the weight allowance, so the team is working on ways to come in under the allowance. It is a challenge, but the team is working diligently on this. Go to the website cy0s.com for many photos from our previous CY0S de-expeditions. And that all came from Murray, WA4DAN. Now here's the one I'm particularly interested in, Bangladesh, Sierra 2. The Bangladesh Telecommunications Regulatory Commission has officially granted special authorization for the upcoming de-expedition program to be held at the UNESCO World Heritage Site from 11 to 17 November 2025. That's a week away. All radio operations during this period will be conducted under the special event call sign Sierra 21 SDX. And you can QSL that operation via I-8 Kilo Hotel Charlie. The DX Mentor features a new podcast this weekend, a discussion with young op Pia, DL7PIA. Pia is one of the youngest hams to win the CQ Marathon contest in Europe in 2024. She is also an accomplished contester, a POTA operator, a violinist, a pianist. Well, you get the picture. Check it out. Let me know what you think. If you want to follow all the latest DX podcast and YouTube releases, you should check out the DX Mentor Facebook page and subscribe to be kept to date on all of the DX activities. So here's our contest updates. I know that the ARL contest sheet is read elsewhere in this podcast, and the contests that I mention are sometimes redundant. However, there are a few contests that I have found to be especially useful for DXers who are trying to fill band slots or work an all-time new one. I mentioned the French RAF 160-meter contest last week. This week, we have the All-Australian 160-meter contest. The dates and times are 1600 Zulu to 2359 Zulu, November 15th, 2025. This is a CW contest. The suggested frequencies are 1810 to 1950 kilohertz. However, participants should carefully observe your national regulations for 160 meters. The exchange is RST and serial number. If you work any of this contest, drop me a note and let me know how you did. And you have to be careful on 160 because there really are no dedicated CW or phone segments. Historically, I stay toward the bottom for CW, but if the DX is up above, I'll go up above. If you would like a copy of the special Swadexa newsletter for October that has over 100 pages of articles about 160, again, just drop me a note and I will send it to you at thedxmentor@gmail.com. Until next week, this is Bill, AJB, saying 7-3, and thanks to my ex-whale Karen for her love and support. I hope to hear you in the pile-ups. Have a great DX week.
Imagine that you can buy a device for a few $100s and listen in on private conversations, military negotiations, and even intercept important commands for power systems around the world. This is not a scene from a spy movie, but harsh reality. The vulnerability was accidentally discovered by researchers from the University of California and the University of Maryland. For 3 years, they listened in on secret military and private communications. The result was astonishing. Almost half of all satellite transmissions were completely unencrypted. Analysis of the intercepted traffic showed that the following was transmitted over the open airwaves: private phone calls and SMS messages from T-Mobile customers, Wi-Fi data from airplanes, critical commands for managing power grids and oil platforms, military and police reports revealing troop locations and details of secret missions. This discovery completely destroys the myth of the safety and security of satellite communications. Governments and corporations rely on these systems, considering them to be reliably secure. In fact, the risks are much more serious than just a breach of confidentiality. This vulnerability can be used as a weapon to track troop movements, sabotage vital infrastructure, and steal data on a massive scale. The most disastrous aspect is that scientists analyzed only 15% of the total traffic, meaning that the actual scale of the problem could be much greater. This issue affects more than just the military and big business. Your personal calls, messages, and internet traffic on airplanes are often routed through satellites. If the connection is not encrypted, your data becomes accessible to anyone. Even worse, hackers can create fake base stations that mimic satellite signals and connect your phones to them without your knowledge. But the harsh reality is that the secret services probably could have known about this problem for years and actively exploited it. Without large-scale global efforts, vast amounts of our most sensitive data will continue to be made publicly available, remaining easy prey for those who want to intercept it.
You are listening to This Week in Amateur Radio, available as an on-demand stream from Spotify, Deezer, and wherever podcasts are available.
Welcome to the 45th segment of Ham Radio History, a century of amateur radio. Ham's organizations, events, inventions. I'm Will Rogers, K5WLR. Our thanks go out to Chris Cadella, W2PA, for allowing us to use his website in the presentation of these segments. Now join us as we bring you this, the next chapter of Ham Radio History. The fourth time's the charm. This is part 2 of this segment. Shortly after he returned from his trip to the U.S., he began preparing to try. Via telegram to Schnell, he announced his intention to transmit on 100 meters from 9 to 10 p.m. Eastern U.S. time, beginning on 25 November. The word was then spread via broadcasts. Having just built a new tuner, Schnell was ready and listening on 100 meters the first night and copied 8AB immediately. Commenting later on that scheduled reception, Warner wrote that his tuner, the most god-awful-looking haywire receiver you ever saw, had hurriedly been assembled. At the appointed hour, there Deloy was, right from the first dot, readable all over the house. Wow, did this shortwave stuff work! Deloy continued to call ARRL for an hour as arranged, along with his cipher group, GSJTP. He was notified by other means of the good copy, and the next night he sent 2 messages that were copied by both Schnell and 1MO and John Reinars at 1QP. The first message ever sent from France to North America via amateur radio read, Nice, France, ARRL. Want this first transatlantic message to convey most hearty greetings of French to American amateurs. Leon Deloy. The second message suggested a scheduled 2-way contact. 1MO immediately asked for and received permission by the supervisor of radio to test on 100 meters. All was ready. The following night, Deloy again called for 1 hour starting at 9:30 p.m. Eastern Time, sent 2 messages, and ended by asking for acknowledgement QSL. Schnell then sent a long call on 110 meters and immediately heard Deloy replying. Not quite ready to believe it, Schnell and Warner, who had joined him at his station, suspected it might just be a coincidental blind transmission, not a reply at all. Will the fellow never end his call and say something, wrote Warner. Aha, he breaks. And then, my lads, came the first transocean R in all amateur radio history. Oh boy, was that a thrill! The history-making first intercontinental amateur QSO was in the log. Deloy's first in QSO message to Schnell was, QRK, your SIGS QSA via 1 foot from phone on Grebe. FBOM, hearty congratulations, this is fine day. MIM, please QSL number 12. This meant he had received Schnell's transmission with signals that were readable and very strong, being heard 1 foot away from the headphones on his Grebe receiver. MIM is the alphabetic equivalent of the Morse code for a comma. Lastly, he asked for acknowledgement of his messages numbered 1 and 2. At 1MO, 8AB was coming through equally well, copyable on Schnell's loudspeaker from 25 feet away. After acknowledging Deloy's messages, Schnell sent some of his own, including greetings to various French notables such as Pierre Corre, the president of the French Joint Transatlantic Committee. While this was going on, Reinhardt called 8AB from 1XAM on 115 meters and heard Deloy acknowledge and ask him to QRX stand by. 1XAM was Reinhardt's experimental station in South Manchester, Connecticut, specially licensed for operation on 100 meters. Warner also exchanged compliments with Deloy for a short time, then Schnell invited Deloy to send a message for WNP, the Macmillan Arctic Expedition, on behalf of French amateurs. Although Schnell missed some of it, Reinhardt copied it solid and acknowledged receipt. He and 8AB then chewed the rag for a while. For years we have dreamed of this, beamed Warner. For over a year we have seen it coming. For weeks we have been sure that winter weather would see the thing accomplished. It had been done, fellows. We are actually in back-and-forth contact with Europe over our amateur sets. After successfully sending the WNP message to 1MO on his second attempt, Deloy developed some transmitter problems and had to sign off just before 12:30 a.m. The next night conditions were very poor, making a repeat performance impossible. The night after that, on Thanksgiving Day, 29 November 1923, 1XAM made a short contact but could not copy 8AB reliably because of interference from KDKA's short concert wave on 103 meters. On the 30th, 1MO was hearing 8AB quite loudly but could not copy what he was sending due to heavy static and QRM generated by local receivers. 4 other amateurs reported hearing him too. More significantly than just being a record for 100-meter work, some amateurs began to recognize that operating on that shorter wavelength rather than being more of a challenge may have actually been what made it all possible. All three stations on this first set of QSOs were transmitting using the same Reinhardt's modified Hartley oscillator, 8ABs being powered by 25-cycle unrectified AC, which made it copyable using a non-oscillating detector, and the Connecticut pair both ran 500-watt transmitters with some degree of rectification on the plates. All receivers were based on regenerative Reinhardt's tuners, a Grebe at 1 XAM and a version at 1 MO that was, as described by Warner, at best a pile of junk, a friendly jab at Schnell. The point of all this was that there was nothing remarkable or special about any of the equipment, except for the fact that the contacts were all made with it tuned to very short wavelengths. Warner concluded that the accomplishment is merely a demonstration, more effective than all of our talk of the efficiency of the shorter waves. He then admitted that it would be hard to explain to you fellas, we know, how an ARRL officer happened to win the Brown Derby offered by the editor of QST as a trophy to the first ham to work to Europe. We hear agonized yells of collusion. We're helpless, though. Schnell vowed his determination to win the lid. He got busy and did it, and there's nothing else to do. He has won it. Jealous of our high British hat, we think, and wanted something to wear himself, H.I. For his part in the achievement, Leon Deloy was later made a Chevalier de la Légion d'honneur, or Knight of the Legion of Honor, the fifth degree of France's highest decoration, first established by Napoleon Bonaparte. It had been awarded to Edwin Armstrong in 1919. Testifying before the U.S. Senate 7 years later, Maxim described the event to try to convey the excitement of each new achievement in amateur radio. It is difficult to explain the thrill that accompanies an experience such as this. It is sublime and carries with it a sort of uplift that makes us better and deeper thinking men. The precision of it all, the picture of the Frenchman sitting in his little den in France, waiting for the precise second to come around, hand on key, the Americans sitting in their little shack in the little street in New England, silently listening and watching the time, the miles and miles of lonely black ocean over which the little electromagnetic oscillations must travel, are utterly compelling to us amateurs. Included in this material are quotes from the following. Kenneth B. Warner, The Editor's Mill, QST, December 1933, page 7. Kenneth B. Warner, Transatlantic Amateur Communication Accomplished, QST, January 1924, page 9. Clinton B. DeSoto, 200 Meters and Down, The American Radio Relay League, 1936, page 97. President Maxim testifies at Washington, QST, April 1930, page 29. We tip our TWIAR cap to Chris Cadella, W2PA, for granting us the use of his website's materials. Ham Radio History, A Century of Amateur Radio, Ham's Organizations, Events, Inventions, as we prepared this segment. I'm Will Rogers, K5WLR, reporting for This Week in Amateur Radio.
You're listening to North America's premier amateur radio and technology news magazine of the air. We are This Week in Amateur Radio, distributed worldwide at twiar.net.
Foundations of Amateur Radio. Recently I explored the use of a radio device aptly described by a fellow Aussie electronics engineer Ozeng as absolute witchcraft. I'm talking about an RF circulator, one of which is sitting quietly on my desk. Roughly 60 millimeters square, 30 millimeters thick, weighing in at just under half a kilogram, unexpectedly with a 200-year history. Let the spelunking commence. The moment you start reading the circulator Wikipedia page, you'll see this sentence, quote, "Microwave circulators rely on the anisotropic and non-reciprocal properties of magnetized microwave ferrite material," end quote, with a helpful reference to Modern Ferrites Volume 2, Emerging Technologies and Applications, a 416-page reference that promises to dig into the nitty-gritty, showing 55 hits for the word circulator. Anisotropic, you ask? It's a property that describes velvet. Rub it one way, it's smooth. Rub it the other way, and the hair stands up on the back of your neck. Wood is another example, easier to split along the grain than across it. While we're at it, reciprocity in physics is the principle that you can swap the input and output of a linear system and get the same result. If you know me at all, it should come as no surprise that I went looking for an inventor. There's over 12,000 patents referring to a circulator, including more than a handful relating to nuclear reactors. In 1960, a prolific Jesse L. Butler came up with patent US 3255450A, multiple beam antenna system employing multiple directional couplers in the lead-in, which states, quote, "This circulator has the characteristic that energy into one port will leave another port to the exclusion of a third," end quote. If you recall, that's the exact phenomenon I used to describe the RF circulator on my desk. So, job done. We have our inventor. Not so fast. The patent goes on to say, quote, "Circulators of this type are discussed in an article, The Elements of Non-Reciprocal Microwave Devices, by C. Lester Hogan in Volume 44, October 1956 issue of Proceedings of the IRE, pages 1345 to 1368, end quote. The IRE is the Institute of Radio Engineers. I found a copy of that tome, thank you worldradiohistory.com, which includes the following sentence, quote, "Until a few years ago, all known linear passive electrical networks obeyed the theorem of reciprocity. Today, several different types of passive, non-reciprocal microwave networks are in practical use," end quote. A footnote refers to an article by Lord Rayleigh on the magnetic rotation of light and the second law of thermodynamics, and includes images of an optical one-way transmission system from 1901. In that 1901 article, Lord Rayleigh in turn refers to a paper published 16 years earlier, in which he observed that light polarization can be made to violate the general optical law of reciprocity, using a system that consists of two so-called nickel prisms, a crystal that can convert ordinary light into plain polarized light, invented by William Nicol in 1828. Using two prisms arranged at a 45-degree angle, you can make light go through it in one way, but not the other. Lord Rayleigh, also known as John William Strutt, in a very sparse footnote states, quote, "that magnetic rotation may interfere with the law of reciprocity had already been suggested by Helmholtz," end quote. Further digging gets me to an 1856 publication of the, quote, "Handbuch der physiologischen Optik," end quote, or the Handbook of the Study of How the Eye and Brain Work Together, where Helmholtz says that, translated from German, according to Faraday's discovery, magnetism affects the position of the plane of polarization. This gets us to 1845, where Michael Faraday experimentally discovered that light and electromagnetism are related. His notebook has the following sentence, paragraph 7718, written on the 30th of September 1845, quote, "Still, I have at last succeeded in illuminating a magnetic curve or line of force and in magnetizing a ray of light," end quote. Today, we call that the Faraday effect. The best part? You can read Michael Faraday's diary right now and see the whole thing. So, who then invented the RF circulator? From mastodon to circulators to modern ferrites to non-reciprocal microwave devices to multiple beam antennas to magnetic rotation to optical reciprocity to nickel prisms to the Faraday effect, this is the perfect example of standing on the shoulders of giants. And the result sits as a little box on my desk. just so you don't feel left out. Your mobile phone likely has one of these devices on board. I'm Ono, Victor Kilo 6, Foxtrot Lima Alpha Bravo.
Bruce Page, KK5DO, is here now with this week's AMSAT report. Bruce?
Thanks, John. Have you ever wanted to own your own satellite? Not one that is space-ready, but one that will function as if it were in space. AMSAT has the CubeSat Sim Kit. We have them available several times a year as the volunteers build them, and we are working to have even more available. Here's the neat thing. The kit comes with all the boards fully assembled. You will need to stack the boards, attach the frame, and then mount the solar panels. After this, you will have a simulator that will be able to charge the batteries from the solar panels, transmit 6 different modes, BPSK, FSK, SSTV, APRS, CW, and act as a crossband repeater. Besides all that, receiving any of the modes with an RTL SDR dongle and some software, you can see how the batteries are charging and discharging, as well as other data from the simulator. I finished assembling mine this week and will be taking it to some club meetings around the area. Great for schools to get involved in satellites and learn orbital mechanics. This is Bruce Page, KK5DO. Back to you, John.
And thanks, Bruce, for that report.
It is time for this week's look at solar weather and the terrestrial propagation forecast. Solar activity has reached high levels due to a pair of X-class flares. The first was an X1.8 on November 4th from region 4274. Associated with the flare were Type 4 radio sweeps, a 160 SFU-10 flare, and a partial halo coronal mass ejection directed mostly off the northeast limb and coronagraph imagery. Although the majority of the ejecta is expected to pass behind Earth, there is the possibility of a shock enhancement late on November 6th to early on November 7th. Region 4274 continued to be in a growth phase, however, the intermediate spots appeared to begin to separate from the larger trailing spots. An X1.1 flare was also observed on November 4th from a region just beyond the east limb near S15. Associated with this flare were a Type 4 radio sweep and a non-Earth directed coronal mass ejection observed off the southeast limb on November 4th. Solar wind parameters were mildly enhanced, but in decline. Solar wind speed decreased from approximately 480 km per second to nearly 420 km per second. The phi angle was mostly positive. Solar wind parameters were likely to trend towards nominal levels on November 5th and 6th. Parameters are expected to become enhanced with the arrival of the next coronal hole high-speed stream on November 6th and 7th. There are also now 3 coronal mass ejections, 2 that left the disk November 3rd, and 1 on November 4th, all from region 4274, that are projected to pass behind Earth with tail ends of their magnetic clouds interacting with the coronal hole high-speed stream. Solar activity is expected to be at moderate levels on November 3rd through to November 17th, due to the delayed return of regions 4246 and 4248, that seem to be rotating into the Earth-side solar disk between November 3rd and 4th. At least 2 other regions are expected to emerge from the east limb until November 10th, as observed at Gong far-side images. A G1 storm is likely on November 7th and 8th, due to the reoccurrence of coronal hole high-speed stream influences. R1 and R2 radio blackouts are possible during the November 3rd through November 9th period, due to the returning regions 4246 and 4248. For more information concerning radio propagation, visit the ARRL Technical Information Service, read a quick guide to HF propagation using solar indices, and check out the propagation page of Karl Lewetzelschwab, K9LA. For customizable propagation charts, visit the VOCAP Online for Ham Radio website.
We pause for stations along the network to identify. We are This Week in Amateur Radio, available as a stream to your favorite digital device on Spotify, TuneIn.com, Overcast, iHeartMedia, and wherever you download your podcasts.
Just ahead in radio sport this week, November 8th through the 9th, the ARRL EME contest. That's CW Phone and Digital. Also November 8th through the 9th, the WAE DX contest, RTTY. The JIDX Phone contest. That's phone, of course. The OKOMDX contest, that's CW. Also, November 8th through the 10th, it's CQWE contest. That's CW phone and digital. On November 9th, the FIRACHF contest, that's phone. And on November 11th, the DARC FT4 contest, that is digital. On November 12th, the RSGP 80-meter Autumn Series, single sideband phone there. And on November 15th, the All-Australian 160-meter contest, that is CW. Remember to visit the ARRL contest calendar for more events and information. Upcoming Section, State, and Division conventions, November 15th, the Superstition ARC Superfest and Electronics Expo, hosting the ARRL Arizona State Convention. That's in Mesa, Arizona. December 12th through the 13th, the Tampa Bay Hamfest, hosting the ARRL West Central Florida Section Convention. That's in Plant City, Florida. January 10th, the Ham Radio University ARRL New York City Long Island Section Convention in Brookville, New York. And on January 16th through the 17th, it's the Southwest Florida Regional Hamfest ARRL Southern Florida Section Convention. That's in Fort Myers, Florida. And remember to search the ARRL Hamfest and Convention database to find events in your area. ARRL is calling on all radio amateurs and GMRS licensees to join our nationwide grassroots campaign to pass the Amateur Radio Emergency Preparedness Act. ARRL has made it very easy to send your letters to Congress, as a matter of fact. HAM should go to sendaletter.org/HOA, and GMRS users should go to sendaletter.org/GMRS. The letters will automatically be sent to your elected officials, encouraging them to support the bipartisan bills. Passage would give amateur radio operators the same rights to install antennas on their property as those enjoyed by users of TV antennas, wireless internet, and flagpoles. Radio clubs should also prepare letters of support signed by each club officer. For more information about the ARRL campaign to pass the bill, visit www.arrl.org/HOA.
During one of the always popular CubeSat simulator presentations, Alan Johnston, KU2Y, AMSAT Vice President of Educational Resources, showcased recent improvements to the CubeSat simulator during last month's AMSAT Annual Space Symposium. The AMSAT CubeSat simulator is a small, low-cost spacecraft simulator that serves as a tool for academic education, public demonstrations, and theory and design disciplines. It can be used in a classroom, lab, or training setting to introduce the basics of satellite operations, or it can be used to teach science, technology, engineering, and math exercises. The pace of development in 2025 was similar to 2024, with several new features rolled out. The V2.1 software release added 2 new telemetry modes, FunCube mode and crossband repeater mode. In addition, the Fox-in-a-Box version, 4 beta Raspberry Pi ground station disk image, was also released. In 2025, we released the first set of CubeSat Sim activity guides. The problem statement for the activity guides is, I just built or borrowed a CubeSat Sim. What can I do with it? Activity guides are step-by-step instructions for how to do a STEM education activity using a CubeSat Sim. Some are very easy to do, such as listening to the sounds of the different modes on an HT and or looking at modes on an SDR waterfall. Others are more challenging, such as doing telemetry analysis using FoxTelem. Activity guides include questions for students to answer as they do the activity. Each also has an instructor's guide, which has example data and answers to the questions. The CubeSat Sim activity guides are released under a Creative Commons with Attribution license, so anyone can edit and modify them as long as they indicate they were originally developed by AMSAT. This allows teachers to customize them and include them in their lesson plans.
A giant radio telescope in Crimea used in the past to support missions to Mars and Venus and attempt to contact alien civilizations has been destroyed in a drone attack. Ukrainian Defense Forces took down the 230-foot or 70-meter antenna dish to prevent Russian forces from using it to guide attacks on its territory. The RT-70 radio telescope has been under Russian control since the annexation of the Crimean Peninsula in 2014. According to Defense Express, Russians carried out major upgrades to the 5,000 metric ton structure to use it for military communications. The telescope reportedly served as an antenna for the GLONASS satellite navigation system, Russia's alternative to the American GPS. Reportedly, the use of the RT-70 radio antenna increased the accuracy of GLONASS by around 30%. In late August, footage emerged captured by a drone slamming into the 50-year-old radio telescope. The drone, according to the Defense Express, aimed at the 200-kilowatt radio receiver at the heart of the telescope. The custom-made receiver produced in 2011 in Moscow during the last major upgrade of the telescope will be hard to replace, Defense Express said, meaning Russia will not likely be able to repair the antenna anytime soon. The destroyed dish was one of 3 RT-70 radio telescopes built across the former USSR in the mid-1970s to form the Soviet Deep Space Network. Soviet satellite controllers used the radio telescope near the city of Yevpatoria on the Black Sea coast to communicate with several missions of the Venus exploration program Venera in the late 1970s and early 1980s. In the 2000s, the telescope featured prominently in several initiatives intended to contact alien life. Over 20 message packages were sent from the telescope in 4 messaging campaigns targeting potentially habitable planets orbiting stars outside the solar system. Most of these messages have not yet reached their destinations. The earliest to arrive at its target is heading to an Earth-like planet orbiting the star Gliese 581, some 20.5 light-years from Earth, which it is expected to reach in 2029. The Yevpatoria RT-70 radio antenna also carried out astronomical research, detecting signals from planets, asteroids, and distant galactic centers. In the 2000s, the telescope supported the European Space Agency's missions Mars Express and Rosetta, destined for Mars and Comet 67P respectively. According to Orbital Today, the Shane Mirror Telescope, the largest optical sky-watching machine in Ukraine, featured a 7.8-foot mirror, is now under the control of the Russian Academy of Sciences, and so are the optical telescopes, radio telescope, and laser rangefinders at the Semez Observatory, located at Crimea's southernmost tip. Elsewhere in Ukraine, the giant Ukrainian radio telescope in Kharkiv sustained significant damage in 2022 when the region was under Russian occupation. Orbital Today reported that Russian troops stole instruments and computers from the observatory and laid landmines across the 1.6 million square foot site covered with more than 2,000 dipole radio antennas.
Amateur radio on the International Space Station was the first educational payload on the International Space Station. As a result, ARIS is celebrating 25 years of the ISS with an SS TV event to take place November 12th through the 20th. The series will also celebrate scouting. Series 30 will consist of 12 different images transmitted every 2 minutes on 145.800 MHz. Follow ARIS on social media for additional details and updates.
Amateur Radio Digital Communications, or ARDC, has a mission to support the tinkerers, the dreamers, and the builders who keep ham radio strong. They recently issued a reminder that they are actively looking for applicants. Grants are available from ARDC, giving top priority to projects in one of several areas. Supporting satellite technology for ham, analog, and digital communications. Developing hands-on, open source, and educational materials and projects for learners in schools and clubs. And delving into open source hardware and software systems that include SDRs, new modulation techniques, and codec technologies. ARDC said that projects outside these areas would also be welcome to apply, but these areas are closest to the core of the organization's goal of promoting the freedom to tinker, build, communicate, and openly share information. Visit the ARDC website for more information.
You are listening to This Week in Amateur Radio, available to download as a podcast from anywhere on the web podcasts are available.
The 43rd Annual AMSAT Space Symposium and Annual General Meeting featured a special presentation of the amateur radio aboard the International Space Station by Frank Bauer, KA3HDO, the ARDC Executive Director. The presentation highlighted many accomplishments for the year 2025. A major accomplishment was achieving 25 years of continuous amateur radio operation aboard the space station. While celebrating that achievement, ARDC is aware of substantial changes happening in the space industry and embraces the shift towards commercial missions. With the upcoming decommissioning of ISS in the next 5 to 6 years, ARDC is listening to its NASA and ISS U.S. National Laboratory priorities. As a result, ARDC has modified the emphasis on its mission as follows: an independent backup communications capability for ISS, which boosts ISS crew morale through enriching youth, community, and amateur radio engagement, inspires, engages, and educates K-16 youth in STEM and STEAM via 10-minute amateur radio contacts with the on-orbit crew, a workforce development powerhouse. During the 4 to 6 month pre-contact preparations, students learn about space exploration and science research, space communications, radio science and technology using amateur radio, and ongoing ISS research activities. Youth contacts keep astronauts proficient in ARDC radio operations and ground stations proficient in support of ISS backup communications. The main ARDC prime initiatives continue to be STEM and STEAM education, spaceflight hardware development, and spaceflight operations. Now, the ARDC 2.0 educational vision for the future is to inspire, engage, and educate students and lifelong learners. This means more extensive educational outcomes for all, engaging educational projects and lesson plans, multiple space stations on ISS and commercial missions, and lunar orbiters and landers. Bauer described the initiative that are currently underway, including the ARDC payload is now a facility on ISS, enabling partnerships to employ ARDC facility, expansion to Axiom commercial space station flights, expansion to Crew Dragon via Fram-to-Ham missions, more SSTV opportunities, educational extension initiatives including the Student Mission Control Program. Frank then spoke in detail about several outstanding successes for the year, such as the Fram-to-Ham mission and the ever-popular slow-scan television operations. Both events enjoyed exceptional exposure and impressive participation by students around the world. Bauer went on to thank NASA, the ISS U.S. National Laboratory, the ARRL, and AMSAT for financial and in-kind support, and to Amateur Radio Digital Communications for critical resources. You can view the complete presentation on AMSAT's YouTube channel.
The 6th Annual Youth Dream Rig Essay Contest is about to get underway. Here with all the details, reporting from League headquarters, is John Ross, KD8IDJ.
The contest is sponsored by the Intrepid DX Group, a California-based 501c3 nonprofit organization promoting amateur radio in developing nations. But this year, a change. This year, rather than our past essays, we are seeking well-thought-out and clearly communicated project proposals for a public access amateur radio station, said Paul S. Ewing, N6PSE, president of the Intrepid DX Group. This year's contest is called America Radio for Greater Good. Written proposals may be submitted between November 10th and December 10th, 2025, by amateur radio operators age 25 or younger, describing how they would establish a club, contest, community, or emergency communication station in a school, church, fire station, community center, hospital, or other public building. And that station must be in the USA, and only U.S. licensed amateur radio operators may submit proposals. And proposals may be submitted via email to the Intrepid DX Group at gmail.com or via USPS. The awardee of the complete station will be announced on December 15th, 2025. For more information about the Intrepid DX Group, visit its website at intrepid.dx.com. I'm John Ross, KD8IDJ.
This is a departure from our conventional essay contest, added Ewing. We're looking for proposals that would place the station in a secure and common area where it could be enjoyed by other licensed amateurs. Once the winning proposal is selected, the proposal author will have up to 60 days to secure written permission from the owner or guardian of the facility. The written permission must indicate approval for the station and the antenna to be installed. The proposal author may be the trustee of the station. The equipment provided will include a high-frequency transceiver, VHF and UHF transceiver, a 13.8 volt power supply, two 100-foot lengths of coax and antennas. For more information about the Intrepid DX Group, visit its website at intrepid-dx.com.
It is time for NASA's weekly satellite shorts from all over. And this week we begin with SpaceX 10,000th Starlink satellite launched to orbit, and 8,562 active as of October 20th, a staggering two-thirds of humanity's active satellites in orbit that are controlled by a single private company. And lastly, two former NASA administrators criticized the agency's current approach to using SpaceX's Starship for the Artemis III crewed lunar landing, calling for an urgent redirection to reach the moon before China. In a fireside chat at the American Astronautical Society's Von Braun Space Exploration Symposium on October 29th, former administrators Charlie Bolden and Jim Bridenstine expressed skepticism about NASA's current Artemis architecture. China aims to conduct the first launch of its Long March 10 rocket and a lunar-capable crew spacecraft next year, according to a top official. The announcement from the China-manned Space Engineering Office comes as the U.S. prepares to send its Artemis II crewed mission around the moon as soon as February 2026.
Many amateur radio clubs and organizations are planning on-air commemorations and special events for Veterans Day 2025. In Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, the Holmesburg Amateur Radio Club will honor the Continental Marine's birthday. Special event station Whiskey Mike 3 Papa Echo November will operate November 8th through the 12th from 1300 to 0400 UTC each day. In Christiansburg, Virginia, the New River Valley Amateur Radio Club will mark the holiday on November 11th from the National D-Day Memorial in Bedford, Virginia. Special event station Whiskey 2 Bravo will be in operation from 1500 to 2000 UTC on 14.275 MHz. A QSL card will be sent with a self-addressed stamped envelope. Contact these clubs for additional information.
A well-regarded businessman who served the amateur radio community and was a friendly and familiar face at many hamfests has become a silent key. Many customers in the amateur radio community knew him simply as John B., but John Bartshear, N1GNV, was also known for his Connecticut-based business, Quicksilver Radio Products, and his personable demeanor. He was a visible presence at hamfests and activities with the Meriden Amateur Radio Club. Before starting Quicksilver more than 20 years ago, John had been the advertising manager for the ARRL's publication, QST. Licensed in 1989, John and his club also ran the Nutmeg Hamfest, the New England ARRL State Convention in Hartford. John became a silent key on Saturday, October 25th, while hospitalized. His longtime friend and part-time employee, Peter Freiler, W1AIR, said that the business remains open while the family copes with its grief. He said that Quicksilver's long-term plans were unclear. Peter said that John found great joy in meeting with fellow amateurs at Dayton and at New England's Regional Nearfest, which he particularly loved attending. He said that he often spent more time just chatting with visitors than trying to sell them anything, which, given his friendly nature, was not surprising.
You are listening to North America's premier news and information service for the amateur radio hobbyist. We are This Week in Amateur Radio.
Is AMSAT Oscar 7 or AO7 still the oldest amateur radio satellite in orbit? AMSAT Oscar 7 or AO7 is the second Phase 2 amateur radio satellite constructed by the Radio Amateur Satellite Corporation, or AMSAT. It was launched into low Earth orbit on November 15, 1974, and remained operational until a battery failure in 1981. After 21 years of apparent silence, the satellite was heard again on June 21, 2002, 27 years after launch, and it continues to be used by amateurs daily even now. For a couple of decades, AMSAT has been able to proudly boast that this bird is the oldest operating satellite in space. However, that record has been challenged. After 47 years of silence, LES-1, a satellite launched by the U.S. Air Force and MIT's Lincoln Laboratory in 1965, began transmitting again. Its signals were detected by Phil Williams, G3YPQ, from North Cornwall in southwest England on December 18, 2012, verified by other members of the Hearst Group, Flavio AB Arcangelo PY2ZX in Brazil on December 22, 2012, and Mathis Bopp DD1US in Germany on December 27, 2012. In 1963, NASA's Lincoln Laboratory embarked on a groundbreaking mission to build and demonstrate military space communication systems under Project West Ford. This effort led to the development of the Lincoln Experimental Satellites, a series of satellites designed to test high-frequency communication capabilities in space. LES-1 launched on February 11, 1965, and was the first of these satellites. While LES-1 had ambitious goals, its operational success was limited. LES-1 was supposed to achieve a series of technical milestones, including demonstrating the viability of super high-frequency communications in orbit. However, due to miswiring in its ordnance circuitry, the satellite never achieved its intended orbit, and its communication system ceased operation by 1967. According to Williams, LES-1 was determined to be tumbling with a rotation rate of once every 4 seconds, as determined by distinctive fading of the signals, causing its solar panels to intermittently block and unblock the satellite's power source. It is possible that after 47 years, the batteries failed in a manner that allows them to carry charge directly through to the transmitter on 237 MHz, allowing the satellite to resume transmissions when it is in sunlight. The satellite continues to be operational as tracked by the SatNOGS network. The return of LES-1 after being lost in space for so many years presented a fascinating challenge for scientists. The satellite, now referred to as a zombie satellite, had somehow come back to life, despite decades of dormancy. This sparked curiosity within the scientific community, and a team from Lincoln Laboratory, where LES-1 was originally developed, set up a system to track and record the satellite every time it passed over their campus. The question remains, what caused this satellite to come back to life? The most plausible explanation centers around an electrical anomaly. This short could have allowed the satellite's solar panels, which had been inactive for years, to provide enough power to reactivate its communication system. While this explanation remains speculative, it highlights how even outdated technology can sometimes defy expectations under the right conditions. Despite the uncertainty surrounding the exact cause of LES-1's revival, the event is still a testament to the resilience of space technology. LES-1's unexpected resurgence provides a valuable link to the past and offers insights into the evolution of satellite communications.
Here's a reminder that Youngsters on the Air Month takes place in December, and the Radio Society of Great Britain in the UK says a special call, GB25YOTA, will be active throughout the month. In various parts of the world, emergency communications continue to promote the use of the amateur service, as well as other modes and methods to the next generation. In India, ham radio operators are focusing more on DMR, digital mobile radio, as an alternative to analog VHF, UHF, and HF. 50 young hams were recently given training in DMR programming and operating by the Indian Academy of Communications and Disaster Management and the West Bengal Radio Club. According to the club secretary, Ambarish Nag Biswas, Victor Uniform 2, Juliet Foxtrot Alpha, this was the first hands-on training in DMR for radio operators who will be using DMR in the vast remote delta region known as the Sundarbans. Meanwhile, in the Philippines, members of the Ham Radio Emergency Communication Group DX1HAM devoted part of the 68th Annual Jamboree on the Air scouting activities to teach Boy Scouts of the Philippines the basics of operating two-way radios. The hams were preparing the next generation to be familiar with the next kind of radios being used by licensed emergency communicators when severe storms imperil public safety for their Western Pacific island archipelago.
If you plan next year to attend the Radio Friedrichshafen in Germany, you may wish to set aside a day and do some sky gazing that has long been a companion to amateur radio. Astro, an astronomy trade fair, is making its premiere next year. The exhibition center will be home to the large ham radio trade fair from June 26th through the 28th and will be welcoming amateur astronomers and technology hobbyists on June 27. Space is being set aside in Hall B1 for a trade fair focusing on astronomy, astrophotography, and related activities, giving hams and others many more worlds to explore.
At the annual general meeting of AMSAT members held as part of the AMSAT Symposium in Phoenix, Arizona last weekend, newly elected AMSAT President Drew Glassbrenner, KO4MA, outlined some future directions for the organization. Noting that membership in organizations and voluntary associations of all types has been declining across the board in all areas of society, Glassbrenner suggested a two-pronged approach. First, reduce the cost per member. AMSAT has already made major steps in that direction by closing the office and changing to an all-volunteer administration, and also by changing the AMSAT Journal from print to a digital publication. The organization should seek more opportunities to economize. Second, increase membership by creating a strategy to actively seek and invite new hams. The board has just approved a free student membership to bring young hams into the organization. Reinstating a college activity night on the satellites, an AMSAT YouthNet, and publicizing youth satellite activities are priorities. Another possibility might be a two-tiered membership structure with a low-fee introductory membership. Glassbrenner also noted that government budget cuts have caused NASA to eliminate the CubeSat Launch Initiative program, which provided free launch opportunities to educational projects. AMSAT has benefited from the CubeSat Launch Initiative program, but has also purchased commercial launches in the past. He indicated that AMSAT should not wait to see if CSLI is reinstated or replaced with a similar program, but that the organization should move forward to fund commercial launches for Golf T and Fox Plus satellites that are nearing readiness in coming months. Another challenge facing AMSAT is that it is becoming increasingly difficult to operate in low Earth orbit. While orbital debris regulations forbid launches to higher orbits without meeting stringent technical requirements for deorbiting, re-entry devices are largely unavailable or unproven. The Golf program is meant to address this, but launches to higher orbits are also difficult to find. Future rules may mandate propulsion for collision avoidance in low Earth orbit. A strategy to meet these orbital challenges is to focus on developing amateur radio payloads that can fly on other satellites. The Italian Green Cube satellite, IO-117, was an example. To take advantage of these opportunities, AMSAT engineers must focus on developing payloads as a series rather than as single projects so that units are on the shelf and available on short notice. The SDR Gen 2 transmitter board, an updated version of the units flown on HuskySat and MESAT-1, is a major step in this direction, as is the updated PacSat board under development. The Golf and Fox Plus programs are also being crafted to create satellites in a series with iterative improvements and an up-tempo launch cadence. Finally, Glassbrenner called for strengthening international collaboration with other AMSAT organizations around the world, as well as establishing mechanisms for strategic planning at the board of directors level. His address was received enthusiastically by those in attendance.
You are listening to This Week in Amateur Radio, available to download as a podcast from anywhere on the web podcasts are available.
Two amateurs have been recognized by the YASME Foundation for their ongoing contributions to young amateur radio operators in helping them develop technical and operating skill. Ed Engelman, KG8CX, is being honored for his work with the YACH program, which serves young amateurs. YACH is an acronym for the Young Amateurs Communications Ham Team, which connects young radio operators around the world to form friendships and share their experience. Don Jones, K6ZO, has been recognized for his ongoing work training and supporting young operators in rural Malawi. One of the teenage operators from Don's training sessions has recently been added to the team of de-expeditioners who are going to Andaman and the Nicobar Islands, the Bay of Bengal, next year. Both hams will receive the YASME Excellence Award, which was established in 2008 by the Foundation. That announcement was made October 30th. In the same announcement, the Foundation's Board of Directors said the YASME has also made a grant to support the RM Noise Project, which employs artificial intelligence to remove noise from sideband and CW reception.
Robert John Hannon, G4RQJ, was not just one of the best-known and longest-serving members of the Summits on the Air community, but perhaps one of its best-loved. He was there in 2002 when SOTA was a dream realized by so many outdoor enthusiasts who believed that combining radio with a bit of adventure would be a peak experience in every sense of the word. Rob became a silent key on September 25th in the Rysdale St. Cuthbert's nursing home. His death was reported recently on the SOTA Reflector. Even as poor health began to hamper his activities, Rob's enthusiasm remained strong. His final activation, made in 2018, was number 916. Even away from the summits, he was a particularly familiar face at the annual Norbrecht rally in Blackpool, where, accompanied by his wife Audrey, he staffed the SOTA stand and greeted visitors warmly. The SOTA Reflector Post noted that his cheerful and caring demeanor was as present on the air as it was off the air. The Post said, whether answering your call as a chaser or in a summit-to-summit QSO, he always sounded as though he was having the time of his life and was absolutely delighted to hear from you. Rob was 84.
The estate of a silent key in the U.S. has endowed the creation of a high-ranking position at his alma mater in the state of Iowa. A native of Iowa, Gary Swenson, Kilo Alpha 2, Hotel Alpha November, served in the U.S. Army for 30 years before retiring as a colonel in 2005. Before entering the military, he had earned his master's and doctoral degrees in economics from Iowa State University. His lifelong love of learning and reading carried through into his amateur radio career and now prominently into his legacy. Gary became a silent key this past June unexpectedly when he had a heart attack at the age of 75. His estate is funding the establishment of a Dean of Library Services on the university campus. The library is a cornerstone of the university, with more than 2.3 million physical items in its collections and another 2 million ebooks, as well as access to online publications in various disciplines. According to the university website, more than 1.5 million downloads of the campus scholarship and research projects are completed each year from its digital repository. The library service's inaugural dean, Hilary Seo, said the gift would benefit future generations of students well into our next century of service. That educational mission is consistent with much of what Gary did after retiring from the military. He tutored at a community action center near his home in the state of Virginia and was active with the Mount Vernon Amateur Radio Club.
And finally this week, the FCC's Space Bureau has been asked to approve a proposed launch next April for a satellite in non-geostationary orbit that will deploy mirrors to provide sunlight on demand, according to the company's website. Reflect Orbital, a startup company based in California, has filed its application this past summer for a license for what it hopes will be the first of 4,000 mirrored satellites that it wants to place in low Earth orbit by 2030. The April launch is being eyed for a demonstration satellite which will carry a mirror that measures 18 by 18 meters, or 60 by 60 feet. Sunlight's reflection by that envisioned constellation would extend daylight beyond twilight by as much as 4 hours, increasing solar power production to locations where Reflect Global has customers. The company says that its technology supports clean energy generation, but astronomers, biologists, and other scientists have raised questions about the prospect of light pollution on human and animal health and the ability to study the skies effectively. Astronomers, in particular, have said that lighting up the dark skies would impede their work, which uses sensitive cameras. According to published reports, Reflect Orbital recently began working with astronomers to minimize the mirror's impact on them. Meanwhile, scientists have observed how nocturnal species' lives can be disrupted and perhaps imperiled by artificial light during the night. This past May, the U.S. Air Force awarded the project a $1.25 million Small Business Innovation Research contract to support its progress.
This Week in Amateur Radio is holding open auditions for news anchors for the weekly national worldwide amateur radio news service. If you have a good radio voice and can reliably read provided news copy, we are looking for you. This, of course, is an all-volunteer position. An amateur radio license is not required. You must have a high-quality microphone, headset mics are not used, and be familiar with audio editing software to record and edit your finished news stories before uploading. If you would like to try out for a weekly or bi-weekly anchor position with North America's premier amateur radio news on air and podcast, please send an email to our producer, George, W2XBS. You can include a sample MP3 of yourself reading news copy sent as an attachment to W2XBS77@gmail.com. That's whiskey, the number 2, X-ray Bravo Sierra 77@gmail.com. Be sure and use Anchor Audition in the subject line. Please include your phone number and a good window of time for a callback to discuss your submission and our operating logistics to see if This Week in Amateur Radio is a good fit for you. We hope to hear from you soon. This Week in Amateur Radio is heard around the world on amateur radio repeater systems, streaming on the internet, or on great low-power FM broadcast stations like WGXC-FM, part of the Wavefarm on 90.7 MHz in Akron, New York, serving Greene County and the southern regions of New York's Capital District. Many of the news and information items heard in this edition of This Week in Amateur Radio have been provided by the American Radio Relay League, the ARRL Audio News Service, and the ARRL Letter, AMSAT, the Radio Amateurs of Canada, the Shortwave Listening Post, the Federal Communications Commission, the Radio Society of Great Britain, and Ofcom, the South African Radio League, the International Amateur Radio Union, the Wireless Institute of Australia and the Australian Communications and Media Authority, the New Zealand Association of Radio Transmitters, the Amateur Radio Newsline, the Rain Hamcast, Eric Guth, 4Z1UG and QSO Today, QRZ.com, the International Telecommunications Union, the 425DX News, Parks on the Air, and the Soda Reflector, and various news sources on the Internet.
With special thanks to all our weekly news sources and to you, our listeners, that wraps up this edition of This Week in Amateur Radio. If you'd like to write to us, you can find everything you need, including archive editions of the news service, at our website at twiar.net. And now, for all of us at This Week in Amateur Radio headquarters and our news team around the world, this is Chris Perrine, KB2FAF, wishing you a 73.